Yay. Hi, everybody. So excited. Yay. Truly so excited for you guys all to join. Sorry, we're running a minute late. This has been a webinar we've been so excited to do, and such a great group of speakers. I know everyone's going to learn a ton. So just wanted to give a little intro before I kick this over to Jennifer, who's going to lead this amazing panel discussion. My name is Rachel Klausner. I'm the founder and CEO of Millie. We do workplace giving and volunteering software. Probably many of you on the call are our users, although I know that there are a whole bunch that are not. But today the discussion is really going to be about leveraging employee resource groups, and especially in a lot of your impact work, and how those two things can kind of weave together in a lot of instances. So we're really excited for today. Hopefully you guys get a lot of good nuggets, both the macro of like how folks are setting up ERGs and things like that, to like micro details on different ideas that you can take with you to your own employee resource groups or affinity groups or any types of groups that you guys have within your organizations to create community. We just love that, and we just think it's such an important part of the employee experience and just work life today. We know so much of folks, lives and friendships and everything in that genre happens in work. It's just natural. We spend so much of our day at work. And so it's super important to create those communities, not just the broad ones across the entire company, but also those micro communities. And so we're just really, really, really excited for you guys to hear from these amazing panelists. So that's the background. If anyone has any questions and things like that, I'm gonna be in the chat just monitoring, and I'll make sure that we kind of get all your questions in. So if you have any questions, feel free to jot them in. There's even a little questions tab, or you can put it in the chat tab, any of those things. While we're kicking off, and I'm going to shift over to Jennifer, if anyone wants to, I'd love to hear kind of what folks' connections to ERGs are, employee resource groups, affinity groups, any sort of groups. I know most of the folks on today lead different groups in their companies. So if you want to just like in the chat, just intro yourself, the group you lead, maybe the company you're at, where you're located, whatever, any fun things, just so we can kind of make it really interactive. We love to hear it, and it also helps our speakers give context and connect with some of the other folks that are listening. So feel free to start that. I see a lot of folks from a lot of different companies today, so I think we're going to get a really broad mix. So yeah, we're really excited. I'm also going to be dropping a bunch of resources in as well. We did create a whole toolkit, which we're really excited about, for anyone who wants to kind of build out your groups pages on Millie. We actually built out a toolkit for a lot of different templated groups, so you could at least have some content to start. So I'll throw that in the chat as well towards the end. So really excited for this conversation. And yeah, I'll let Jennifer take it from here, and I'm gonna go rogue. How do I let me go rogue?
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, we're super, super excited for this session today. And actually, I think I'm work with a lot of you on the call, and I know this team that is like the amazing team we have on the panel today really well, so I'm really excited about that. And it's really funny. This morning, a friend of mine recently gave me a paper planner, which like feels kind of archaic, but actually it's really nice and has all these really like great quotes every day, so it's become more of my quote book. And I opened it up today, and the quote was, "Diversity is not about how we differ. Diversity is about embracing each other's uniqueness," which I thought was really nice, and it kind of, I think, nods to like a lot of the things that you guys are doing in your companies to really kind of bring out and celebrate that. So it's kind of a fun way to start the day knowing we have this time today. So without further ado, I want to introduce our awesome panel. We have Britney Robbins, who is the Employee Experience Program Manager for WebPT. She is a self-proclaimed people geek, which I love that. And she manages all of WebPT's recognition and culture programs. And she is also the lead for their Culture Council and the ERG DEI committee. So Britney, thanks for joining us today. And then we have Angie, the Senior Associate of HR at Stash. She's also the Latinexcellence ERG lead as well. And Angie is a seasoned HR professional. She has over 5 years of experience in supporting people experience functions. She's been with staff for almost 3 years, or Stash, sorry. She supports and oversees all of Stash's global onboarding, leave of absence, immigration, all of the programs on that front. And she's really passionate about operationalizing, streamlining, and scaling people functions, which we love to hear. And she's really passionate about the work she's doing as chair of Latinexcellence, and has been able to promote greater inclusivity for Stash's Latina population and bringing more structure in order to the group so that they can really, achieve all that they want to achieve. So thank you so much for being with us today, Angie, as well. And then last but not least, we have Erick Smith, who is also at Stash. She's the Senior Manager for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. And just to give more context on Stash, they are an industry-leading investing, banking, education platform that's empowering middle-class Americans to invest and build long-term wealth. In Erick's role, he leads the effort to build a culture that supports every employee, regardless of their background. So from day one, people feel welcome, that they can make an impact, and will thrive with the full support and advocacy of their colleagues and leaders. Erick has over 5 years of experience building diverse and inclusive cultures with that scale and grow. So we are super pumped to have such a great group of folks today that are going to be presenting and sharing their ideas and insights. So I guess just to get started, I think it would be helpful if each of you could maybe talk a little bit more about what ERG groups look like at your companies and how they're structured. So maybe we'll just keep the same order if you want to, kick off, Britney, and tell us a little bit more about what ERG groups look like at your company.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. As she said, I am Britney Burns-Robbins, and I am in charge of all things employee experience at WebPT. So our ERGs actually got started in 2020 when everyone started working from home. We are a digital first company in the US with an office in India. But this year in particular, our WebPT Culture Council brought in our DEI task force and our ERG leads into our Culture Council. So the Culture Council is made up of 5 subcommittees that are focused on areas of WebPT's culture that our council are most passionate about. And one of those 5 subcommittees is our ERG DEI committee. And we're committed to creating a culture where there's transparency, safety, and authenticity, and that are the key elements to our environment, where everyone feels like they belong and that they matter and can thrive. And the committee is made up of our ERG leads as well as our DEI ambassadors. So this year we've restructured our ERGs a little bit. We currently have 8 ERGs, which we call our Propel groups. And 5 of those, including Propel Us, Propel Her, Propel Pride, Propel Parents, and Propel Vet, are communities of WebPTers that partner with our Culture Council subcommittees to create some meaningful moments that matter through events, activities, and guest speakers. And each group has a co-lead, 2 co-leads who attend our monthly Culture Council meeting, as well as host group meetings for their ERGs, either monthly, bi-monthly, or quarterly, as well as hosting some activities in partnership with our other subcommittees. We also have some additional ERG groups, including our Propel Faith, Propel Me, which is our multi-ethnic group, and then our Propel Mental Health group are actually Slack communities that are resources for WebPTers who are seeking others they have common interests with, and they operate more organically and serve as a place to share ideas, thoughts, and experiences, as well as partner with our ERGs that have co-leads that operate them. So that's how we're functioning now with our ERGs. In the past, we've had some different structures, but we're finding that the co-leads are working together to partner with our groups like Live Better, our Give Back Committee, our Minty Committee, which is our fun activity committee, and everyone working cohesively together. We're creating some really great moments that matter for our WebPTers.
That's great with Britney. I love hearing about all of those different groups. And I think later in the discussion too, if you want to, we'll talk more about some of the ways you're communicating with those groups and engaging the members, but that's super helpful context. Actually thinking maybe, Erick, it might make sense for you to talk about the overarching structure of the groups. And then maybe Angie, you could just touch a little bit more about your experience as the lead for Latinexcellence.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. Like Jennifer said, Erick Smith, I lead diversity, equity, inclusion at Stash. So similar to WebPT, in 2020, we started with around 3 employee resource groups, but they were really more informal groups. So one of my tasks when I joined Stash and at the end of 2020 was to formalize those groups and expand upon the current ones that we currently have. So right now we currently have 5 high performing employee resource groups, each with an executive sponsor, each with a lead and co-lead and committee members. The groups, they have their own mission, their own vision and goals, as well as a budget of $10,000 a year. I think when we first started out, Angie, definitely correct me if I'm wrong, the groups had $5,000, and our organization saw the need and increasing that, right? Because they saw the value in making sure that the programs that we put out wasn't, lacking because of funding, right? And I think we saw definitely great improvements in that. But the vision and the mission of all the ERGs, they really tie back to our values of prioritizing people. And that's one of our key values at Stash. And we make sure that we live that every day. And our ERGs make sure they do that as well. One of the key things that I love about our employee resource groups is that in every single thing, no matter it's 2020, 21, 22, 23, storytelling is at the pinnacle of everything that they do. Storytelling has been proven to build empathy, not only within organizations, but, since the prehistoric times. And that's something that our ERGs do pretty well. And they really build empathy within our organization to make people understand, where they're coming from, but also see them as not just as a coworker, but as a human, right? And somebody that you work with on a day-to-day basis and you want to get to know this person even more. So at a high level, that's where our ERGs are at. But Angie, who's been leading our Latinexcellence ERG for the past year and some change, Angie, I definitely want to hear more too as well from you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Very stoked to be on this panel. Thank you so much. So my name is Angie. I am currently the Latinexcellence lead here at Stash. I've been leading for about 2.5 years. I'm really excited to grow the group. Currently, the ERGs is large at Stash. We have about 5, as Erick mentioned. We have AAPI, which is for our AAPI community. We have Black for Black community. We have Latinx for our Latin community. We have Stash for LGBTQ+A community, and Women Stash for all women who identify as women. So how we think about leadership in these groups, really, each of them has a designated chair and a subcommittee of leaders within those chairs who help really execute leader on the chair on the role. For example, Latinexcellence is set up with my role as chair. I have 3 or 4 members who lead different functions. Those functions are operations, marketing, communications, and engagement. Really the function of these committees is to provide structure and support to the entire group, while also just helping bring great heads to our organization. Each group and leader is supported by an executive sponsor, as Erick mentioned, and this member is typically someone at Stash who's a senior leader or sit within the executive committee. At Latinexcellence, we have the pride of really having our chief financial officer, Adriel Lara, be our executive sponsor and bring that really powerful leadership perspective to the group and help us hone together the work that we do.
Awesome. I really love hearing a little bit more about how the groups are working. And I know it's super helpful, I think, for the people that are joining us today, because I think our participants, are ranging. It was interesting to hear all of you too, like from 2020 forward, it seems that not the resurgence, but really these groups getting more of a role and a voice in your companies. And also, Erick, love the tie into values too. I think companies that are looking to start these groups too may want to, really kind of delve into what are our company's values and how can we, structure groups that reflect that. Also interesting to know about executive sponsor. I'd love to hear a little bit more from each of you about executive sponsor and sponsorship, what that looks like at your company, just in general, how that relates to the leadership buy-in, and then also the role of the group lead as well. So I guess, the people who are really kind of help to give the group a little bit more direction and, entrench it in your companies. So it's kind of a 2-part question. I don't know, whoever wants to tackle that one first.
Yeah, I'll do the executive sponsor one, and Angie can definitely take the second one. So what kind of really formalized the groups at Stash was the executive sponsor piece. We wanted to make sure that our employee resource groups were represented in rooms that they may not be in, for example, right? So at the top executive level. So like I mentioned, we have 5 executive sponsors. I think if I'm thinking correctly, 3 out of 5 of our executive sponsors do not identify with the groups that they are currently leading. And that's kind of by design. I love the groups that are led by people who identify as part of those groups, but the ones who are not, they get to learn a lot, right? They get to learn about the group, but also they can share their learnings too as well. And I think the power in having an executive sponsor that does identify as a group is there's a step ladder up there, right? You can see yourself in that position, right? For example, Angie, Angie's group, Latinexcellence, they have a executive sponsor, Adriel, who is our CFO, right? So there's actually a step ladder up from that perspective, from a Latin A perspective. But either way, we find value in having executive sponsors who are really advocating on behalf of these groups, whether or not they're in the rooms or not. And they're really talking to their peers around the importance of these groups. They show them to events. They're making sure that these different stories are heard around the organization. And we found tremendous value in them. And we have some, great executive sponsors who I definitely give a shout out for, because Angie would tell you, without them, I think the groups wouldn't have been far as long as they are right now. So I definitely want to shout them out. But I think when you're doing this work and you want to start ERGs, that's one of the things that you want to do, at least second. The first is definitely your mission, goals, and vision. So you can present it to executive sponsors to say, hey, listen, this is what we want to accomplish. Can you help us with this? Because at the end of the day, you're not working for the executive sponsor. They're kind of working for you, right? They want to make sure that they, project everything that you're trying to, do within an organization. So you want to make sure that whatever mission, vision, and goals that you want to do, that person can actually do it. And the second part would be to find an executive sponsor. And then from there, that person will have your back along the way from that perspective. So from an executive sponsor standpoint, it's very key to the success of employee resource groups.
Yeah, just to add to Erick's point, from like a perspective of how it's worked for Latinexcellence, we've had the pleasure and the honor, honestly, of having two great executive sponsors. First, our previous CTO and your current CFO, who both have really brought structure and brought that leadership buy-in, been in the rooms where our members may not be in, have gotten the support we need to really create communities that are impacting Smash's overall value. And also just having, a clear leadership development role and like vision to the group where they can see themselves portrayed as these folks and doing the work that they're doing and really being impactful. So, and also just from a budgetary perspective, our executive sponsors have been absolutely critical in showing staff and leadership that it's necessary for us to have the budget that we have so that we can give to the community, so that we can really bring these amazing events to Stash and educate our community on who we are, what we're doing, and our impact overall.
Thank you, Angie. I love hearing more about like the ways that you can kind of approach the executive sponsors. It's like very tactical information, I think, for people who are trying to, get more support at their companies. Britney, I don't know if you mentioned executive sponsor per se, but I'm sure that there are similar kinds of roles that are happening within your company and at your group leads. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, so we're lucky because we do have great partnerships with our senior management team. Our Chief People Officer, Felicia Taylor, has been integral in making our DEI efforts and our ERGs more in the forefront. We actually have one of our 2023 priorities for the company as a whole is a people and culture goal that is to strengthen WebPT's inclusive culture through hiring, developing, and retaining our talent. So that allows us to build our ERGs. We also this year started a partnership with Caris by KJ. And through that, our ERG leaders have had the opportunity to go through some formal training through their ERG Connect Academy to learn about the best ways to structure ERGs. We also are lucky, even though our groups individually don't have an executive sponsor per se, two of our groups actually are led by VPs at the company. So our Propel Vet group, Jen Worthy is one of the co-leads of our Propel Vet group, and she is our VP in RCM. And we also have Propel Her, and our VP in our PMO team, Linda Stanton, is co-leading that group as well. So we have gotten lucky in the fact that our leads of our actual groups are folks who are higher up within the company and believe in standing up those ERGs, and they also have partnerships and support from our executive team. So we're still in the process of building our partnership through Caris has been great for really creating that structure. And we've even taken that structure and put it into our actual culture council as well, to continue to move the needle forward and continue to build and strengthen our WebPT inclusive culture.
Wow, thank you, Britney. I'm glad that we've had a chance with all of you to spend kind of on like structure and organization and like the kind of top-down influence that you have. But let's talk a little bit more tactfully about engaging employees and group members, how you're going about engaging them, how you're recruiting members, the types of activities that you're planning. I know there's some questions too. Folks want to know about what does success look like and how you measure it. But let's start talking first about some of the tangible things that you guys are doing, and then we'll move into that sort of, how you kind of evaluate and continue successfully engaging your members. Who wants to dive in on just some of the activities that you've been doing? I know all of you have been doing amazing things, so we've got lots to talk about.
Yeah, I can dive in.
So really engagement is an area of development for Latinexcellence, and I think it is an area of development for all ERGs. However, a few initiatives that we've undertaken we have monthly cafecitos. We promote coffee chats within the group and with leadership, and we promote in-person meetings if they live within the same vicinity. So let's say a member lives in New York and another one lives in New Jersey. We promote them to come together. We give them budget to do so. So that they can build that connection and start to really get to know each other. And for cafecitos in particular, which are our monthly gatherings, we've taken on a gamified approach that has really helped bring our members closer together. We laugh, we have a good time. And then we've also taken on rewarding them depending on who wins the game, if that's an individual, if that's a group. And this has really helped us keep our numbers strong and keep people engaged, and just not be another meeting that they come to. It's a place where we come together and really just celebrate our community. And one thing Latinexcellence is really excited about launching this year is leadership and development. So we're thinking about a webinar series, or also just workshops that we can attend virtually so that we can grow as leaders together.
Yeah. And then just to add to that, because Angie leads our group, so I'll just keep it brief in terms of some of what the other groups are doing. So I know Women at Stash group, which is our largest group here at Stash, they have a lot of professional development things that they're doing right now, like mentorship circles. They have, monthly series around that. Our Black Magic group, they have a safe space session every month, just kind of checking on everybody. And they have, kind of rules around that to make sure that everything stays there. APA ERG has a few things too as well. And we also love to engage our groups during our Heritage Months, which is big for us, right? And whether it's in person or whether it's online, they come up with some very cool ways to do that. Whether they're inviting people from the outside with expertise on that, they're getting our CEO Liza Landsman involved. It's just really around making sure, like I said, back to that storytelling piece, that's at the center of everything, because that's really what keeps people coming back. They want to continue to hear these stories. They want to continue to learn more about their employees, learn more about the culture in general, right? Like in terms of who we're bringing in from that perspective. So Angie hit a lot in terms of the Latinexcellence ERG, but all our groups, they kind of, have their own ways of doing things from that perspective.
Thank you, Eric. And what about you, Britney? I know you guys have had some volunteering that you've been doing with ERGs.
Yeah, so we're really lucky, and I'll tie it to Millie. We have this year introduced the groups function through Millie as part of our structure for our ERGs, and we are able to tie events that we're doing and campaigns that we're running to Millie and to our ERGs. For example, we have a campaign that we run each month that has a different theme that is sponsored by one of our ERGs. So last month, for Pride Month, we did a Pride Month campaign within Millie for fundraising and volunteer opportunities, and it was sponsored by Propel Pride. We also are really lucky through Millie. We found our partnership with Project Helping to create kind kits, and I actually have one here that I'm done with, but we can send these to WebPTers homes, and we actually do like a virtual session to complete them. Our most recent one, we actually had the one of the leads over at 1 in 10, which is an organization in Phoenix that we donated these to, or we will be donating them to. But it's been a great way, especially because we are a remote workforce in the US, to be able to have a common thing that we are able to do together in a virtual setting. Another thing that we're really proud of is the ERGs have taken the opportunity to bring in guest speakers. Our Propel Vet group had a guest speaker earlier this year, and our Propel Her group is actually having leaders from across the company who are sharing their story as women in leadership. Our CEO is actually planning to be our next guest speaker in August, and sharing stories and her journey through her career. So we have gotten to partner with different opportunities and do everything virtually, which I think has been a challenge, but also an exciting challenge, because we've gotten to see, what are the ways that folks can connect even when we're not in the same physical space.
Terrific. Thank you. And thank you, Britney, for also highlighting some of the areas that you can use the Millie platform to organize activities for ERGs, because I know there's a lot of folks on the call who maybe started on the platform with volunteering or workplace giving or doing some of the campaigns, but then are wanting to maybe take that next step and start utilizing the group's function more. So if there are other activities that you guys have found helpful, any other tools that you think have been helpful in organizing or streamlining or anything like that at your activities, would love to hear some of those just to share out with those who are looking for more insight around that.
I think at WebPT, one of the most positive things we've gotten out of the partnership with the platform is really our Slack integration. So if folks, our general structure for engaging our groups and tracking membership is during their new hire orientation, new WebPTers are encouraged to sign up for the ERGs by going to Millie. And this actually allows us to track membership within specific groups, but also track the membership of what groups WebPTers are a part of. So if they're a part of multiple groups, where we're seeing the overlaps, how we can combine different events that are supported. We recently did a PATS run in Phoenix that was supported by our Propel Vet, our Give Back Committee, our Live Better Committee. So we had a lot of cross-functional events going on. But the Slack integration actually allows us, if it's a public channel, so our Propel Her is a public channel, as soon as they join on Millie, it automatically adds them to the Slack channel. We do have a couple of channels that are private. Our Propel Mental Health group has a private channel, but we've set up a way where within Millie, they're able to see a Google form that they go fill out so they can be added to that group, because it is a private channel, but they still get the same benefits. We connect the events and we promote our events within Millie first to the groups, and then all events that any ERG is running is open to anyone within the company. So it's been really great to be able to have that connection between Millie and Slack, because Slack is where we do 90% of our communicating, but then still be able to tie the event registration. So if we're doing kind kits, they sign up for a kind kit and then they sign up for the actual session where we're going to build the things live together and do some creativity. So that's been my favorite benefit of utilizing Millie with our ERGs, is that integration through Slack.
Awesome. Thank you, Britney. You actually were reading my mind, because one of the next questions I was going to say was, let's talk about communications tools as well as just in general effective messaging, because I think that's always a struggle, because people are well-intentioned at your company to want to get involved and get engaged, but at the same time, people are busy. They have competing work, family life demands. So, sometimes something might seem like one more thing to do. And I think a lot is probably the amazing work you guys are doing to position the activities and the events and message it, and also just you need to be reaching the people that you want to be reaching. Erick or Angie, do you have anything to share around this notion of, how you communicate effectively and any tools you're using as well?
Yeah, I can go briefly, and then I'll give it over to Angie. I think the biggest thing, and I love the Slack integration that Britney talked about, we find it very valuable here. I think the biggest thing, and one of the main reasons why we, sign up for Millie, is that, we've been going through the past forever, but the past few years have been very interesting when it came to whether it's, things racially, disasters that happen. And what we really find value in Millie is that almost as soon as, not the same moment, but maybe like a day or two later, Millie always posts these campaigns to support these things, right? So when the shooting happened in Colorado, instead of us trying to find different organizations to, help out with and sponsor with, because what we heard from our employees is that, hey, like us putting out a statement is great, like that's fine. And, we're here for employees, but what more can we do? And that what more can we do is kind of mobilize each other and kind of donate to certain places that actually put our money where our mouth is, right? And actually giving back to those communities and supporting those communities. And what we find value is that, Millie really immediately finds those things and posts it on there. And we immediately jump on that and post on Slack. We send it to different groups. To make sure that we are supporting those communities. And we're not just paying lip service and saying, oh, we're here for you, and not putting our money where our mouth is when it comes to that. So that's one of the biggest advantages I've seen, and the tools that we do use a lot is those specific campaigns around the specific things that happen, in the world that we can, impact directly with, whether it's money, whether it's volunteering, from that perspective.
Thank you, Eric. To add to Eric's points, particularly for Latinx Heritage Month, which is coming now in September, we're thinking about using Millie to really amplify our external community efforts while bringing the whole of Stash together and really opening the opportunities for allies to be part of this journey and really feel like they're giving back and they're participating. And some of the philanthropic efforts we've looked into so far that tie into our event, which is Forza. That's our theme for this year, which means force, because we are stronger together. So some of the keys that we're looking at are Pro Mujer, Latino economic development, and Latinos for leadership excellence and diversity, which are some of the groups that we're thinking partnering with as nonprofits to really help us live up to our the theme that we're planning this year. So Millie really helps us in that way. And also just from a communication standpoint, helps us really amplify the message to the entire community and Stash.
Thank you, Angie. I love that. And then on that note, like Britney, do you guys have things you're planning that are coming down the pipeline, or other things that you guys want to share in terms of some of the creative, tangible things that you can be doing? I know we still have a whole, we recently did an event talking about, the next half of the year, because we really are kind of past the midpoint now, and we're kind of getting into that kind giving season coming up. So what are some things that you guys are thinking about doing as a company, and then also, leveraging group support?
Yeah, so I don't know how we got here, how it's already July, but the second half of the year is always my favorite. We are planning to partner again with Kind Kits. We have one coming up in August that we're going to be doing flashcards for first graders. And really our focus for the month of August is education. We have great partnerships with junior achievement across the country, especially in Phoenix. We actually have a little storefront as part of their BizTown, which is a lot of fun. It's my favorite place to volunteer. We're also going to do in support of Veterans Day, we're going to do a veterans care kit as well through Kind Kits. But we're really excited about the opportunities to be able to run donations and drives through Millie, because we have done that in the past in our in-office setting. But now finding ways that we can incorporate that into our virtual setting through Millie. So we have food drives that we generally do in November and toy drives in December. We also did do the Giving Madness in March, which was a few organizations that are specifically healthcare related, since WebPT is a rehab therapy platform for rehab therapists. And we ended up donating the matched proceeds to the mental health association, which was really great because our WebPTers actually got to help decide where those funds were going based on votes. So we have a lot of exciting things coming up, but we are still in the process of hashing those out, since we are, I can't believe it's already July.
Although it's early.
End of July.
What about you guys, Eric and Angie? Anything else that you want to share that you're kind of working with, brainstorming about, noodling to kind of get us through that end of year?
Yeah. So end of July, it's really, really August, like next week. So right now it's a mini lull period between Heritage Month. So we're really doing a lot of planning around, what we can do. I think the biggest thing that we want to unlock is our volunteering. With my actual people team, and Angie was a part of it, we actually use kind kits, and I use kind kits with Millie. And I think that's something that we're going to probably try to, proliferate throughout the organization with specific teams as well as, ERGs, because that remote and virtual aspect of it, of just building something for, and what we did it for financial literacy for the Boys and Girls Club, have it with the Stash tie-in. We really found an impact on it. I think we're going to try to push forward and do more of that. Obviously, Given Tuesday is going to mark our 1-year anniversary with Millie. So we're going to, expand upon that and make sure we, give some more organization from there. But, really the ERGs are brainstorming around with different ways to interact with them. One of my favorite ways that the ERGs did is normally we have a month-long campaign for Heritage Months. What our Rainbow Stash ERG, which are LGBTQ plus ERG did, they actually did 4 weeks of different campaigns for the LGBT community, which I found pretty, impactful. And for each week, you were able to donate to a specific cause and kind of go from there with education around it. So looking to do more like that to get people more engaged and involved, because we have a culture here who really wants to give back. You can't really work at Stash if you don't want to support, different communities from that perspective. So definitely more to come on that.
Yeah, and to add to Erick's point, Latinexcellence particularly is really looking at ways that we can use the Millie platform to bring us together, to help us visualize our numbers, and hopefully a more formal tracking tool for membership, so that we can start to really get our members further engaged and excited about being part of this community.
Terrific. Thank you guys for sharing. I've been popping over into the chat and seeing lots of great feedback rolling and people loving these ideas, loving what you're sharing. One question though I did want to touch on that had come up in chat was around kind of the goal setting, how you're setting the goals for the groups, and then how are you measuring success, and how are you identifying what success looks like?
I can take that question. So from a goal setting standpoint, we really think about first coming together and seeing what we really need as a group. So this year for Latinexcellence, we focused primarily on engagement and membership numbers. So we knew that those were our goals. And so how do we build the tactics behind it so that we can measure those? So some of them have been through Millie, others have been through direct outreach. For example, our people team providing us a report on our demographic numbers so that we can ensure that we're reaching out to these folks, identifying these groups. Other ways that we're thinking about is really KPIs, like key performance indicators, that really help us ensure that we're meeting those goals and that we have clear champions. So in my leadership board, particularly, we have champions who are, for example, engagement. They're responsible for the events. They're responsible for measuring how people attend Cafecito. They're responsible for measuring the campaigns that we drive, like rewarding people for coming to Cafecito, lunch, like so forth. So having that clear path and those clear champions and those clear metrics helps us really track success and Latinexcellence.
Yeah, and I can touch on, I think there's a few questions in the chat that I maybe can touch on in an answer here. So that's Latinexcellence ERG, and they're not our smallest ERG, but they're not our biggest ERG. So when I think about our Women at Stash ERG, they're the biggest part of our ERG culture here at Stash, and they have different goals. And I think the question is, do things overlap? They do overlap, but some groups are a little farther along and has a lot more members to kind of lead some of these initiatives. So for them, professional development was their key thing for this year in terms of how they can build on that pillar. So each group kind of have their different ways, and it's by design, right? Because I don't come down to the groups and say, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that for this year. It's more like, what can we do to push your group forward? What can we do to make your group feel more included in the organization? And a lot of it's professional development, as lot of just engaging the regular groups in terms of kind of going from there. So all the groups have different things. In terms of membership, so the membership is really determined by who identifies in those groups. At Stash, we have ERGs that are really for the members from that perspective, and allies, they can kind of come to the events and kind of go from there. So we'll have groups that have 20 members, we'll have groups that have 100 and maybe 50 plus members from that perspective. So definitely ranges from that perspective there. And then I think there was one more question. Do you have meetings every month? So some groups do have meetings every month. Some groups have once per quarter. Some groups have segmented meetings, like within specific committees. If let's say the engagement committee wants to meet on a monthly basis, a lot of the meetings pick up as you get closer to, let's say, a big event, whether it's a Heritage Month, whether it's a historical day, or whether it's an event that they just want to plan with somebody externally or from that perspective. So the meetings definitely range. I think the best case is once a month. Until you're really established, until you're really building, and then you can go to once per quarter for a bigger group meeting. Now, when it comes to leadership, maybe it's more frequent, just to make sure that throughout the year, engagement is at an all-time high. So hopefully that answered a few questions that were in the chat. Hopefully I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, and I'll jump in and say ditto to most of what was already said. The structures are very similar at WebPT as what Stash looks like as far as engagement metrics. Something else that we do measure as well is we do a quarterly ENPS survey. So that's our Employee Net Promoter Score survey. And we measure, any comments that come in that are specifically related to connection and engagement and DEI efforts and inclusivity. We also are currently Great Place to Work certified as well. And our highest score is in our DEI realm. So we measure those metrics as well as individual engagement for different activities. So for our kind kits, we offer up to 50 kits for free to WebPTers. And for most of the kits that we've ordered, we exceed that as far as how many orders we get. So we measure, the participation in that, as well as evaluate if something seems like it's not as valuable, what can we do to make it more valuable? So especially our guest speakers, the cross promotion with different groups, allowing any activities that are open to our ERGs to be open to anyone within the company, and then measuring those metrics. And we're still in the process of building this out, through our partnership with Karis by KJE. We've been able to put a little bit more structure in place than we've had in the past, but we're continuing to see what the best measures are, what the best practices are, and how we can take that into even next year. We do have our ERG leads on a 1-year cycle, so they're welcome to reapply to be the ERG lead for the next year. But we also want to give the opportunity to anybody who is interested in leading that group. We have, sort of a selection process at the end of this year, beginning of next year, and taking the best practices that we've learned this year and how can we improve and make things better and get more engaged.
Thank you, Britney. I think we've addressed most of the questions that have come into the chat. Before we just kind of segue into full questions, I just wanted to see if any of you or each of you wanted to maybe share something that we haven't touched upon directly in questions that you would want to offer up as your advice or recommendation, or some particular insight you've learned through the course of doing this work that you'd want to share, with everyone that's just joined us today. Not to put you guys on the spot, but just if there's anything else, closing thoughts that I didn't ask about or didn't come up already.
Absolutely. I think one thing that's super important is resources and where to get started and how to get started. So Latinexcellence provides various resources to our members. Some of them look like curated swag with their brand and logo, so they can really showcase both externally and internally our brand and mission. Guidance on advice on how to use the learning stipend that we are given here at Stash, which is about $1,500 annually. So it's a bulk of money that they can use towards professional development and how to use that and how to effectively build on that. And also just opportunities to attend external events and be part of chapters, local chapters, national chapters. Some of them are Techeria or Alpha. So really getting involved in the community, ensuring that they're building that connection outside of Stash and also in Stash as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Angie. We do have questions starting to come in, but I also just want to give Britney and Erick anything last closing thoughts they wanted to share before we do some more specific targeted questions that are coming in from our audience today.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that in all the organizations that I've been in, which has really only been 2, ERGs have always been the backbone of a culture. They've always propelled the culture forward, and they've always been a bright light for the culture. So if you don't have any ERGs right now, highly recommend you do, start with ERGs, whether it's small, whether it's one ERG, two ERGs. And if you do have ERGs, just making sure that they continue to push your culture forward and that they continue to have, like Angie said, the resources to help your culture. The benefits of diversity, they're out there both from a people standpoint, but also from a business standpoint. And these groups, they really help in leading that. To Brittany's point, we do an inclusion index here at Stash, and we're able to see just how impactful those groups are within those specific demographics. And I just want to stress it in terms of making sure you have that. Then once you do have your employee resource groups, I'm sure naturally they're going to ask you, what can we do as an organization and as a group to impact communities at large? And that's where, Millie kind of comes in to, help you with that program to be able to give that to those ERGs, but also to be able to see the impact that you're having on specific communities, whether it's during a Heritage Month, whether it's during a disaster or something unfortunate that happens in the world. And that's obviously the next step from the ERG. So highly recommend for anybody who doesn't have it, and then people who do, just continue to fuel them and push them forward.
Yeah, and I'd say one of the biggest things that I've learned throughout this process is that support from leadership is key in order to make our ERGs function and allow employees the space to participate in the ERGs and the activities, but also remembering that everyone is very busy and can't always attend. So we try to do our best if we have guest speakers or if we have different activities that we're doing. The guest speakers are recorded so folks can go back and watch them again or watch them for the first time, and making sure that we recognize that even though someone's not available at 1 p.m. on a Thursday, providing them with the ability to participate in any activity at a later time is key.
Thanks, Brittany. And actually that segues into one of the questions that had come up from our audience is that, can you talk a little bit more, and this is to all of you, but I know you just specifically mentioned about leadership, the selection process for leaders. So what does that look like?
Yeah, so what we do at the end of the year is we send out, an application form, and they can select which different culture council committees they wish to be a part of. But if they're specifically interested in the ERG DEI committee and being a leader within that committee, they specify which group, and we sort of have them explain the why. We've been lucky enough that our Propel Pride group has been led by Kelly Cohen, who is actually on the Phoenix Pride, helps run Phoenix Pride. So we're very lucky that we've had those connections. But this year was the first year that we stood up our Propel Vet group. And we actually had a leader come and ask to stand that group up. So for the most part, it's really they present themselves as desiring to be the lead of the group, as well as explaining why. And then the selection process is normally pretty easy because you can tell who's the most passionate right up front. And we make sure that anyone who is applying to be a part of any of our subcommittees is within good standing with the company, as well as has to have a recommendation come from their manager, as well as approval from their manager to participate. For us, we say it's a minimum of 2 hours per month that you're needing to commit to the Culture Council or the ERGs. And part of that is our monthly meeting with our full Culture Council committee, as well as meeting with their individual partners, their co-leads for their groups, and then running any events or meetings that the groups are leading at that time.
Eric or Angie, do you have anything to add to about the selection process for leaders?
Yeah, all the above. So I always premise it to my leaders that this is not your full-time job. It's a very important job, but it's not your full-time job. And I also hold myself accountable for that. And organizations hold themselves accountable for that too as well. So a lot of the times our leaders are they're volunteer, right? They come to us, they say, hey, we want to do this, or let's say a leader steps down and another person who's been involved in the committees or something like that, they want to step up. It's never a, hey, like, I think you would be good at this, you should do it. Because at the end of the day, it's like, we want people to kind of come up and say, hey, I want to lead this group. I want to push this group forward. I want to go from there. So that's kind of how our process looks. And we don't have a formal, you have to only 1 year or things like that, because again, it's a startup and we've just started on our journey. But as we move along the process and maybe we formalize a little bit more, we'll do that. My previous company, we did do a 1 year basis. I think now it's more like, hey, as soon as somebody's ready to kind of move on, which generally is around a year. Angie, if I'm not mistaken, you took it after a year, after Sam left there. Then that's how we kind of go from there. But it's really more of the passionate people who come up and raise their hand and say, listen, like, I want to lead this. And we just provide them with the tools and the areas to be able to push that forward from there.
Yeah, and to add to Erick's point, I think one of the beauties about the informal process at Stash is just the ability to really make the role your own. For example, you may not be a people leader directly in your role, everyday role, but you do get to be a people leader in this diversity leadership role and really get to talk about strategy, talk about mission, talk about goals. So it gives you the ability to develop yourself in other ways and really build your portfolio as you start to think about future roles.
Thank you, Angie. I think we've touched upon a lot of the questions that have come through. Just maybe for kind of a closing question, there's some interest in learning a little bit more about the types of mission and vision for the ERG groups. I think we talked about the goals and the goal setting, but about, linking, and obviously we talked, Erick mentioning to linking it to your company values. But if you want to touch on a little bit more of establishing the mission and goals, mission and vision, and what types, there are amongst the different ERGs.
I can take that question. For Latinexcellence, particularly when we thought about building our mission, we really thought, how can we tie our mission to our organizational values? How do we actually tie our mission to what we're doing here at Stash so that it does transcend time? So really, when we thought about our mission, we thought about cultivating a sense of belonging that really encourages our Latina identifying employees to thrive in their careers and lives. And we really thought about, like, hey, how do we ensure they bring their best and most authentic selves to work so that they can truly excel both in and outside of Stash? So that mission statement and philosophy helped us really solidify what is now our mission statement, because it came from the core of what we currently value and also our mission at Stash.
Yeah, and at WebPT, our different ERGs actually built out charters. And part of that earlier this year, when we went through the CARIS by KJE ERG Connect Academy, we actually had them take a look at those charters and sort of identify the different areas that they wanted to keep and what they wanted to revise. So that's something that we had, starting off were those charters, and we're continuing to build and grow as we're seeing the groups evolve. But I think that overall, everything does tie back to that overall priority of WebPT for the people and culture goal of strengthening WebPT's inclusive culture through hiring, developing, and retaining our talent.
Yeah, and I agree with it all. It's really about tying it back to the company values, but also what your specific group values too as well, when it comes to that. And the groups come together, whether it's two from a lead or co-lead, or if they have a committee, and they talk about what can we do from our mission to support the company's mission from that perspective, with our groups in mind from there. And each group does that. They don't do it every year because mission and vision should last for a little bit there. But definitely when new leaders kind of come in, they relook at it, right? Most times it stays, but other times it could be a different environment that we're in, and we want to make sure that we, look at it from that perspective.
Thank you guys for, giving some thoughts on that last question. Just before we close out, are there any other questions that want to come through? Feel free to type now or listen to the recording again if we didn't cover everything or you didn't catch it all the first time. But I think we are good. I think we've covered quite a lot of ground. So really appreciate the questions from the audience, and then you guys chiming in with all these really helpful insights, talking about your experiences at your own companies. Obviously, every company culture looks different. Oh, I see some typing. There might be one more last question before we
while the questions are coming in, feel free to, I'm going to speak for Britney and Angie, feel free to reach out to us, especially Angie, who's leading a group right now. If you have any specific questions, or if you want to even just set up some calls, what I found valuable coming into this role, and also like kind of getting where I am right now, is, you know, setting up these calls with people who are in this field and who have been doing this. So feel free to reach out to myself, Angie, and I'm going to speak for Britney too as well, if you have any questions in particular.
Amazing. And we're getting great feedback. Thanking you guys all for sharing. Lots of really good ideas were generated today. And this is really so helpful to really build a community of practitioners. I mean, a lot of this work has existed in some form or fashion, but really now putting it in the spotlight and really having resources dedicated to it is incredible. So we got a comment from Rachel. Britney, Angie, and Erick, you guys are the best. I would echo that completely. So thank you for your time today, for joining us, for sharing, and thank you everyone that joined the call to watch as well. So appreciate that. I hope everyone has a good, hopefully not too steamy wherever you are based in the world on this July global record-setting heat. So even more important that we keep up this good work. But I hope everyone has a good rest of their day.
Absolutely.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much, everybody. It was a pleasure. Have a nice
Thanks,
Monday.
everyone.
Bye.